Mr. President, we elected you as the commander-in-chief.
We need to move from our politics of personalities to politics of issues.
See, March 9th happens. And I think that was the greatest moment of my political disillusionment.
That knock was an irritation to his ears. He would say, naka, 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 naka.
William Ruto has proven that he's such a good politician. But we all know that good politics hardly translates into good economics.
Siasa mbaya.
Maisha mbaya. Welcome to Politikali Konekted, a podcast on everything politics and governance in Kenya and Africa. We unpack the complexities of people, policy, and power. I'm your host, Diana Ngao,
AKA Madam Speaker, and I am Chaka,
AKA the Bishop. Today, we have with us a guest who, if you read the papers, you've definitely seen his name many times. The topic today is everything politics, just as our podcast suggests. And we want to welcome our esteemed guest, the Kidi Mwaga, to the podcast.
Karibu sana.
Karibu sana, Kidi.
Asante di.
Kidi is a lawyer by profession. He's a chairman of the Inter-Parties Youth Forum and a political enthusiast, a columnist on The Standard, as well as a member of the KANU political party.
The grand old party.
Oh, the grand old party. I stand corrected. Karibu.
Asante di. Certainly, as you've said, I am the Kidi Mwaga. The convener Inter-Parties Youth Forum.
Yes.
I read law at the University of Nairobi. I am a member of the Kenya African National Union, KANU, where I have the privilege of serving as the Secretary for Policy and Legislative Affairs.
Okay.
Away from that, I'm seeing my brother Chaka donning his, what is it called? The rosary.
Rosary, yes.
With a cross pendant at the end. I must also hasten to add that, yes, I'm, of course, a Christian, and therefore God's instrument of love.
I love that.
In a hurting world.
Okay.
Yes.
And indeed,
I
the
like
world
that.
has been hurting
Yes.
in the last couple of years, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Pleasure to have you here, Kidi. I hope you're ready, because that is the hot seat. We have a lot of questions for you.
No, sure, I think.
Especially coming from the grand old party KANU.
Yes.
We did an episode a while back on political parties.
Yes.
And just a history of political parties. And KANU played a really significant role in how political parties play. But even before we get to that,
Yes.
we always start with one question, which I'll hand over to the bishop.
Karibu tena
Asante.
sana.
Yes.
One of the things that we pride ourselves in, and where we anchor our vision for even these engagements, is that we affirm ourselves as being part of the narrative as opposed to spectating, standing by the sidelines and seeing what is happening. We took a firm decision to plunge in and be part of shaping the narrative. I say that to then say, hearing your profile, it seems there's rhyming to our predispositions. There seems to be that firm resolution on your end as well, based on the things that you're engaged in. In one sense, a political disruptor.
Yes.
Even from the tone and tenor of your writing. As much as you were part of the grand old party, you were charting new terrain. And so, given this drive, given this bubbling enthusiasm for politics, I think it would intrigue all of us, our audience here with us in this sitting room, to know, when did that political awareness start coming to life? When did you get this sense of this leviathan called politics and its tentacles, to the point that you have now gotten so immersed in the political culture of Kenya? Where did it begin and how?
I think it all began in my mother's sitting room.
Mm-hmm.
I had the privilege of being born of very politically conscious and active parents.
Mm-hmm.
While my old man didn't run for office, but he came of age at a time when most African countries were attaining independence. And being the enterprising young man he was, he ended up becoming personal friends with at least more than one head of states. And of course the bureaucracy below them. So within the East Africa, I think we were home almost everywhere. Then the tragedy is that he died when I was quite young.
Pole.
So then I grew up largely on the memories and the stories that mom told about dad.
Okay.
But the other thing is that my mother has always been a voracious reader. So over and above growing up reading her books, I was also growing up on the stories she told about dad. And as Barack Obama says while quoting Lyndon Baines Johnson, that it is every young man's dream to hope to live up to his father's dreams or make up for his mistakes. So maybe I'm living my dad's dreams, if not making up for his mistakes.
I'm
I like
laughing.
that.
I'm laughing because as you were saying that,
Yes.
what was in my mind was Barack's book, Dreams from My Father.
Yes.
As you were describing growing up on that. So
Yes.
when you then quoted him,
Yes.
it was quite apt. That's very inspiring.
Thank you.
So maybe I could ask, because you said that your family was very in touch with the political happenings of the day.
Yes.
At what point do you remember your first memory of a political event? Maybe it could have been a rally, it could have been an election campaign, it could have been meeting a politician. What was your earliest memory of Kenyan politics?
I think my earliest memory of Kenya's politics was the 97 elections. Because my dad had now made peace with the fact that he was going to... Remember, Jaramogi had died after 92 elections.
Yes.
And while our side of the world was largely in opposition, Jaramogi ostensibly had told our people that it was time to work with the government.
Yeah.
So in 97 elections, my father was one of the people who emerged in South Nyanza that they were going to help Moi get re-election.
Okay.
And so remember around that time, NDP had just emerged.
Yeah.
So my earliest memory about this is that dad was in a very unpopular political outfit. I remember a lot of people coming home to try to ask him to change his stance. We could hear the talk that there is something that dad should desist from. We were too young to comprehend what is it he was supposed to desist from.
Yeah.
But when we came of age, we learned that they were asking him to abandon KANU and join everybody else in NDP. I also remember, because I come from a large family.
Yeah.
So I remember all my siblings who had come of age were registered to go and to become vote. Yes.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of relatives who lived with us who had not taken their IDs, went and took IDs and registered to vote. So I think that is my earliest memory of politics.
Yeah.
And yes, I think from 97, So by the time 2002 was coming, I was much more aware.
Yes.
Yes, because, yes, I was much more aware.
In our previous episodes here at Politically Connected, Chaka and I have spoken quite a lot about the 2002 election.
Yes.
And also in your writings, you've
Yes.
actually also talked about the Yote Yawezekana moment.
Yes.
So maybe you can recant and tell us, I mean, not recant, you can go back in time and tell us about your recollection of 2002. And if we'll ever see a moment like that in our political landscape now.
2002 was an interesting moment nationally and at personal level. Because there was the KANU branch elections of 2000 for those who come from South Nyanza.
Yeah.
And it was Dalmas Otieno versus Oloch Kanindo. My old man was with Dalmas Otieno.
Okay.
I was a little boy, 8 years old, and in 2000.
Yeah.
So by 2002, Mzee dies in the year 2000,
Oh, Pole.
November.
Yeah.
And so everyone in the family was talking about the 2002 elections within the context of if Mzee was around.
Yes.
If Mzee was
Okay.
around. So everyone had wished that Mzee was around to witness
See
2002
this, yeah.
and the intrigues that played out.
Yeah.
So I remember 2002, particularly around the time when initially we were hearing, we were kids, but we remember stories that Raila was running. Then the next thing that Raila was not running. Then we remember the Kasarani Kisirani rhetoric,
Yeah.
particularly from Raila.
Yeah.
We remember the boisterous the LDP rainbow. Then we remember when they went to Uhuru Park and how after Uhuru Park, Raila became this universal hero.
Yeah.
Particularly when he said Kibaki Tosha. And I think the most profound memory I have of 2002 was the time when ECK was releasing results. I was home with my maternal uncle. He's a teacher, almost retiring now. And I remember when he heard that Cyrus Jirongo had lost his Lugari seat. He stood up and jumped and ran outside and ran back. Because for him, that was the clearest sign that Moi was going home.
Oh, wow. It was in excitement.
Yes.
It was in excitement.
He jumped in excitement.
Okay.
When he heard that Cyrus Jirongo had lost.
Yes.
And so he told us, as much as we were young, he attempted to explain to us that Jirongo was one of the KANU's blue-eyed boys.
Yes.
Kitchen cabinet.
Yes. And by then, KANU, the party I work in today, was then viewed as a political edifice that was an enemy of the people. Yes. So those are the recollections I have about 2002.
You mentioned interacting with, then giant political figures like Dalmas Otieno, who I think we most remember for banking rates and the like. Was that so? What was it like interacting with these key figures at that time? Because I get the sense that you were surrounded by quite a number of them because of Mzee's political activities. And how did they play a role in your political formation, even in years after Mzee went ahead of us? Who were some of those key figures, and more importantly, how did they influence your political sensibilities, your political awareness, key things and insights that they may have, infused you with? Yes.
Thank you, my brother Sichangi. Interacting with some of these key political figures as a child was just that at the time. They were dad's friends coming home, driving out. I think also I must say that dad was also very popular with the provincial administration. The local DCs were all his friends. Occasionally, the PCs would come to see him. And so, one thing that did was that his name was respected. His home was respected. His children was respected. So, the fact that Mzee was respected made us grow up with an awareness that there was a legacy we had to live up to. And so that awareness, even in the days of teenage rebellion, like every child does, when you leave home, when you cannot be told anything, but we were particularly I was constantly aware that even as a rebel, there are things I cannot do. So while everyone out there thinks that he's such a bad child, but the bad child was conscious that there are things I can't do because I am son of a war kid. So yeah, I think the awareness that I didn't have the latitude to just do anything is the most profound lesson I gathered by having these people come to see Dad when I was a kid. Yes.
And maybe for majority of our audiences, they would not be able to understand how powerful it is to be, not powerful, but how connected it is to have friends who are PC, and DOs,
Yes.
Maybe Chaka, you can give us a bit more context. If we were to look at if there was a DO of today, what would be their rank?
Pre-2010 constitution, what we had was centralized government. And in fact, in the constitutional struggle, even in 2005 and the years leading up to it, one of the key areas of contention, which is why devolution is a cornerstone of our constitution, was that issue of power aggregating to the center. By aggregating to the center, how it would then cascade down was through the provincial administration.
Yeah.
The president
could
call not just PCs, but even down to the DOs. And I happen to know this very well because Kuka Richard Sichangi was a senior chief.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, who had been plucked from...
I told you I know his name.
Politikali Konekted.
He was plucked from being a teacher, an excellent one at that, and even took a pay cut.
Oh, really?
Yes, because of, he felt he was being called to leadership. And for him, whereas right now, in an idealized world, provincial administration and the like should be apolitical, for him, serikali ni KANU. And so when NAC was coming around in 2002, that NAC was an irritation to his ears. He would say, Naka, 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 Naka. For him, it was KANU, it was life member.
Yes.
So, when you talk of DCs and DOs and PCs, that was power.
That
coming
was
to
power.
visit you at home.
It was.
Yes.
It was.
In a Land Rover.
I remember the Land Rovers. I remember the Land Rovers. But for me, majority of my political consciousness happens post 202. Yeah. So now here you are a member of KANU.
Yes.
What made you join KANU? Of course, it's the Nini, but at what point? Is it when you were in UON? Was it after? Did you want to run for a political seat? What was the other ambition to join KANU apart from the familial influence?
So I must say that I came of age at a time when KANU was demonized. And it was almost like associating with a leprous man to associate with the brand KANU. So we grew up at the time when the orange wave of 205 takes place when we're in primary.
Yeah.
Then 207 happens when we are going to Form 1.
Yeah.
So 208 we are joining Form 1.
Yeah.
I leave Kanyawanga in 2010. Kanyawanga is the high school I went to.
Okay.
And around this time, from our side of the world, ODM was the it.
Yeah.
So when ODM was it, of course, we come of age when we even believe that we are members of ODM. So I take my ID and I head to the polls for the first time in 2013, when I believe that the Raila presidency is an ideal that I must live and witness.
Yes.
And so it does not happen in 2013, but I'm quite active. I am observing things. I am engaged very peripherally politically, particularly at the constituency level. If my MP Junet watches this, he might remember me from those days. And then 2017, of course, happens. We are idealistic young men. We attempt to get to the center of things. I have the privilege of being the chair of the Students for NASA.
Oh.
When we set up NASA Young Turks. And of course, we ran a successful campaign in 2017.
Yeah.
Of course, we all remember the electoral abracadabra that Chebukati and his people engaged us in.
Yeah.
And it was such a refreshing moment when, through the party leader, our presidential candidate, and the running mate, went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, to a large extent, agreed with us that the elections as that it had been conducted was not free and fair. So post that, then there is Resist. I was an active member of Resist. Then March 9th happens. And I think that was the greatest moment of my political disillusionment.
And March 9th is the moment outside Harambee House.
Yes.
And what happens?
And we see our savior, the man whom we had thought was our savior, shaking hands with the man we thought was the representation of political evil, Uhuru Kenyatta. Remember that point in time?
Yeah.
I will give you, let me narrate something to you. Sometime around November, after Uhuru is elected.
Yes.
There is an attempt to hoist a billboard with Uhuru's photo in the heart of Kisumu City, at the roundabout of Kisumu Boys.
Yes.
And then, as they are doing their due, people have not realized that it is the photo of Uhuru they are trying to erect.
Yeah.
And then when they are done and people realize that this is Uhuru's portrait being erected right in the heart of the CBD, the town came to a standstill in under 5 minutes. Tear gas was logged, people ran out of the city, shops were closed, and that just underscores how much the people from where I was coming from had developed disdain for President Kenyatta.
Yeah.
Post 2017 elections.
Yeah.
Hatutaki posta ya Uhuru hapa Kisumu. Hiyo ni mara ya kwanza. Ya pili, watu wa Jubilee waende kwa wafunde virago waende mapema. Hiyo ndio maoni yangu, lakini wawache posta kurusha hapa kama wanataka imani.
And so while we were engaged in Resist, because we were young, even impressionable, we had almost believed that the idea of secession was tenable. We had not seen those such calls as part of political brinkmanship.
Yeah, you were the Gen Zs of that time.
We were the Gen Zs of that time.
Yes.
Very impressionable. And so when Baba shakes hands with Uhuru, and eventually we get to a point where we appreciated his wisdom. And at that point in time, I was personally extremely disillusioned, and millions of young people were disillusioned. And I think I lost faith in my party, ODM then, and I moved out of the party.
Okay.
So this happens in March, and I didn't resign formally, but I just stopped going to the party. So in the course of 2018, I decided to go back home. I joined KANU.
The Grand Old Party.
The Grand Old Party. And when I joined KANU in 2018, I must say it has been a pleasant ride to date.
Okay.
Yes, they have given me opportunity to learn and grow. They have entrusted me with positions of responsibility.
Yes.
When I came in, we rewrote the party constitution.
Wow.
We set up the Department of Legal Affairs. We worked on a number of policy documents as young people.
Yeah.
And by the time we were getting into 2022, I had exercised my political muscles enough, better than I had exercised them anywhere else. So I remain grateful to my party, KANU, and I am most glad at how the party has appreciated the mistakes that might have taken place in the past, and how right now it has come back to work with the people, to realize the ideal that in the midst of political darkness,
Yes.
we can be able to forge a destiny of a new political dawn.
Yeah.
Yes.
If anything, there's something that I have seen, because I'm also a youth in a political party.
Yes.
And anytime we interact with other political parties.
I remember you were during Azimio days.
Yes. But one thing I can agree with you and that I have seen, there was a time, I think it was 2020, closer to the 22 election, KANU went through a sort of like rebranding where you were having KANU fresh.
We were fresh.
Yeah. It
Yes.
was, I think it was program with the youth league, and it's after that, and I kept on interacting with more and more members from different political parties. When you met KANU members, when I met KANU members, they were youthful, and it's really hard to get space as a youth in a political party.
You have one of them here.
Yeah, I know. So I'd say hats off, because
thank you.
I know on our side, even in the political party that I'm from, our party leader loves seeing the youth and pushes them to the front.
Yes.
But in other political parties, when you speak to other youths,
Yes.
you see they're being suppressed
Yes.
and told, it's not yet your time.
Yes.
It's not yet your time.
Yes.
Yeah.
The question of the youth voices, youth participation in the civic spaces is an ideal, again, that we must forcefully push. I say forcefully push because if you look at the demographics, you realize that the projection is that by 2027, we will be having almost 20 million voters who would be under 35.
Wow.
It therefore means that in an ideal world, if we were to repudiate all political parties and say that we have a new party, youth-owned, youth-led, then we would have a new president in 2027 elected largely by young people. But in a pragmatic world where we have got our mothers, our brothers, the old and the young, and we are one people, I think that the party that will form power in 2027 must answer the anxieties and the concerns of the young people, and in the same vein and breath, it must be able to mop up this demographic into its numbers. Because remember that the 20 million I'm talking about would still be higher than the votes that the two leading contenders in the last election got combined. So then it means that 2027 is the election year for young people. And they must step up.
I'm finding it quite poetic that in this sense of betrayal of leaving ODM, you're moving to New KANU,
Yes.
which was New KANU precisely because of a similar handshake between Moi and Raila.
Yes.
When
on March 18th,
Jogo ilimeza tinga ikapata constipation.
Yes.
Would it be so surprising now ODM or UDA one swallows the other?
I'm forgetting who said these words, but I remember someone once said that history repeats itself. First as a tragedy,
then as a farce.
Then as a farce. history might repeat itself in 2025, 2027. And in history repeating itself, there are multiplicity of factors. One, we have got the leadership, particularly of ODM, who after engaging in opposition politics for some time, I think are now suffering from opposition politics fatigue. And this is most evidenced when you see the gusto at which they are keen to support the government. Their enthusiasm, in my view, and I could be wrong, does not stem from some newfound higher ideal. I think it stems from a place that, wow, we can make money. We can line our pockets. We can be as rich as so and so. And I think that because if you hear the bulk of the conversation from that side of the world today, they're decrying how Uhuru did not give us anything. So then the question is that, are we in this to line our pockets or to serve higher ideals? But maybe if I were to ask that question, maybe I am being too idealistic because we all know the old conventional wisdom that every actor is self-interested.
Yeah.
And so in pursuit of this self-interest, I'm afraid that ODM might swallow UDA or UDA might swallow ODM. The question is, what would be the political ramifications in 2027? I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think that we are dealing with a very angry populace. Angry from the fact that we have a government that for some time has demonstrated that it is quite imprudent in managing the economy. Because you look at, today we have got BPS out, the budgetary estimates. And when the budgetary estimates are out, you look at the areas where we are keen to take the money, then you realize that the plight, the question, the concerns of the young people is still in the back burner. We are still not keen to become a manufacturing, enterprising economy. And the tragedy, as Professor Fukuyama says, that in the environment, when a polity does not invest in a manufacturing, enterprising economy, then the only recourse in regards to unemployment usually is state sector jobs. Chaka, we have got a state sector that employs about 3 million people from top to bottom. So even if we were to say that Baba's constituency were to come into government, Baba had 7 million votes.
Yeah.
So
it's
then
barely half.
Yes, and then it will also mean that William would have to kick all these people out of government so that he only has a bureaucracy that is ODM. And it means that when I say this, it means that the entire civil service would have to be ODM.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter that other civil servants are there. So I think that it is a brand of politics that might not serve the needs of the moment. And that is why particularly young people might have to turn their eyes inwards and search deep within their souls that as we are getting into 2027, what type of country are we seeking to birth as a result of 2027 elections?
I really like what you said in terms of opposition politics fatigue, because I campaigned with ODM. We were part of the Azimio campaign. And at some point when you campaign and you be in all these places in the country, you form a sort of bond with this
camaraderie.
You know. So when I saw the broad-based, we call it Broadway's government.
Yes.
I felt so betrayed. I think we watched it here with Chaka. I was like, what? I personally felt betrayed.
Yes.
And now I've been trying to rack my head around. I'm like, why? Why are these people all of a sudden singing and becoming flower girls to UDA?
Yes.
But you've said it. I can imagine being years and years and years in opposition.
Yes.
And finally, you get even a small taste of what would be your government, or just a small nini, and it gives you that illusion that, hey, kumbe, this is how it is on this side. Right? And that's where now, and there's something Chaka normally says here, is that we must move away from, and I guess this is where we can argue whether it is idealism, because we also live in the reality of our politics, our brand of politics, where he says we need to move. I'm coming to where you're saying about the youth. We need to move from our politics of personalities
Politics of issues.
to politics of issues. So when we are looking introspectively as a youth, it's not about like mtu wetu ako kwa gava, mtu wetu atatupatia nini. It should be more of, am I getting healthcare? Am I getting education?
Education.
Yeah.
Yes. Am I secure? Am I safe in the road as I walk home? I think the one thing and to President Ruto's credit, I think that we must agree that William Ruto remains one of the brightest political managers this side of the tropics.
Political tacticians.
Chess master.
That's why they call him Doyen.
Yes, I think that the political brilliance of William Ruto still remains unmatched. Because I love how he has handled the question of Luo Nyanza. He finds a young man without a lot of political profile and plonks him in the coveted seat of power called PS Interior. Then, in a couple of days, because this is someone you knew the other day, you see the transformation of his life.
Yeah.
He is with the president almost
Every
every day.
Yeah.
He is having this delegation and that. And his name is now mentioned with a bit of, reverence. And so the MPs who the other day might have even had disdain for him, now realize that he actually wields power.
Yeah.
And if you watched that movie, is it a movie or a series called The House of Cards?
Yes.
Frank Kanda would say politics is like real estate.
Yes.
Location.
The closer you are,
the higher your market value.
yes.
Power is a lot like real estate. It's all about location. The closer you are to the source, the higher your property value.
So these MPs begin to fall over themselves. If you remember when there was this time when women leaders were in the US.
Yeah.
And people who had been insulting Dr. Raymond Omolo are now falling over themselves.
Oh.
If you look at those photos.
Yeah.
And I love the psychological effect that Dr. Raymond Omolo's appointment then played on the rest of the leaders from Luo Nyanza. So that the leaders are falling over themselves to sing praises to Raymond Omolo and the president. But there is also something else. I don't think they're with the people. Because while we would love to talk about things like first finance secretary, cabinet secretary, I don't know, first attorney general, I don't know, first this and first that. It is what if this podcast, Politikali Konekted, was not a family talk show.
Yeah.
I would have said is nonsense upon stilts.
Okay.
Jeremy Bentham.
And thank you for, yes, as Jeremy the Bentham would say, nonsense upon stilts. Because the leaders are eager to move into the president's side and start singing praises because of the rewards, the immediate material reward that comes with it.
Yeah.
But they've not carried the people. The people are still hurting. I am a Luo. I don't have money in my pocket because we have
a PS.
Because our kinsman is the one manning in finance.
Yeah.
Raymond Omolo is the PS Interior.
Yeah.
But Denzel Omondi was killed and dumped in a
quarry.
In a quarry.
Yeah.
Like a dog. Wandai is the CS
Of energy.
We don't pay less for electricity and petrol.
Tokens, yeah.
So then, the general anxiety of a young person in the streets of Nairobi,
Yeah.
the general disillusionment of a kid in the streets of Mombasa,
Yeah.
are the same anxieties engulfing the soul of a young man in the streets of Migori, where I was born and bred. And so this is where I think that, to William's credit, as a political manager, he has been, and he needed the people, he needed the MPs to help with his legislative agenda. And I hope that as that happens, with the people, now that it is clear that we are left out.
We are on our own.
I think it is Frederick Douglass who said that power concedes to nothing but a struggle.
Demand, without demand.
Yes, power concedes to nothing without a demand. And I think that as we mobilize towards 2027, we must first appreciate that where are we? And in appreciating where we are politically as a country, I think that we must remember the timeless words of Martin Luther King Jr., that the world as it is should not stop us from reaching out to the world as it ought to be.
Yeah.
There is very deliberate attempts at the very highest level of the political class of this country to exploit the question of ethnic anxieties, ethnic grievances, to achieve certain political agenda. For instance, when we were at Addis Ababa and things played out as they did, there was a mischievous attempt to lay blame on the doorstep of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
Yes.
One, it is the epitome of recklessness at political messaging. I call it epitome of political recklessness because when a government is in power, one of its first primary responsibility is to pull the different strands of our nation together. And that is why we say that the president is a symbol
of unity.
National unity.
Yes.
So people ostensibly blogging in the name of government and the ruling party and the president are supporting the government of the day should not be given a blank check of attacking people who cannot defend, because Uhuru Kenyatta cannot defend himself against a blogger. But then it is this same government that is sending thugs. I call them thugs because I don't believe our policemen and women would engage in such acts of barbarism, of abducting, abducting young people.
Okay, yes.
It is the same government that has been sending thugs to abduct people who speak up
against
it. So when that same government, either tacitly or through whichever means, gives a nod to bloggers to, one, attack President Kenyatta, two, attack the Kikuyu community, I think that it is recklessness that has got is yet to find a definition. Because the thing is, we are in a politically volatile country generally. And when we say that we must reach out to the world as it ought to be, the world as it ought to be is that we should be in a country where we are able to dampen such ethnic identities. So, but then now, so that I don't lose my train of thought, because I found that very reckless on the part of the government.
Yes, absolutely.
The bloggers who are running that narrative are non-government bloggers.
I agree.
So government cannot escape responsibility. In the same vein and breath, as young people, we must remember not to become the symbol of the very things we detest now. So we must not turbocharge ethnic identities. So we must engage in an intelligent political mobilization that is going to remain blind to ethnic grievances and ethnic identities, and appreciate that where are we?
Yeah.
Why is it that we have the question of unemployment skyrocketing at the levels it is, while we have money to refurbish State House, to I don't know do what to state lodges, to travel around the world?
AU campaign.
I am cautious not to comment on the AUC campaigns because I am an interested party.
Okay.
And I am not sure how much money was
Disbursed.
used in that endeavor.
Yeah.
But this government has proven that it is quite reckless in terms of money. Because I think the priorities are lopsided. That if there was greater prudence,
Yeah.
I think in a small way we should have seen greater productivity and greater attempts at laying the basis for a manufacturing base.
Yeah.
We neither have a basis for we've not laid the ground for a manufacturing base.
Yeah.
The productivity bit, if you look at the last KNBS report, while it is saying that agricultural produce has gone up, it is not attributing it to subsidized fertilizer. And so it is other things like we have had rains in the recent past.
Yeah.
It is not like the dry season we experienced in 2020 to 2021. So then I think that if government was willing to match its rhetoric with action by cutting down on the cost of running government and taking that money and investing it prudently where it matters, we would be in a different place. But because all this is not being done, young people must mobilize and organize better, because we are masters of our destinies.
Absolutely. I see why you're the convener of the Inter-Parties Youth Forum, right? We see why you are given that. You come out very passionately about mobilizing the youth. But I just want to go back to something that I mentioned, Kidogo, the AUC chairmanship campaign.
Yes.
Not really the campaign. It already happened, and now we saw Honorable Raila Odinga didn't make it.
Yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, he did make it. And I felt like there's something I said on this podcast that I saw like February, when was this, 15th, was Kenya's New Year.
Yes.
Why? Because whether Raila Odinga got the AUC chairmanship or not, it was going to completely change our political landscape leading up to 2027. So now that he has lost, what do you foresee happening in our political landscape?
A number of things could play out. Many are the instances in history when societies in crisis have sought leadership. You know, Winston Churchill is said to have been nothing more than a husband who drank scotch too much until Pearl Harbor happened, and until World War II happened, and Neville Chamberlain was pussyfooting. So then, when he was recalled to lead the United Kingdom, then he was able to lead Britain through its finest hour. There is also the French leader, Charles
de Gaulle.
Yes, who, when the country was in crisis, was recalled and was able to lead France during what was called the Algerian crisis. I think that where Kenya is, William Ruto has proven that he's such a good politician. But we all know that good politics hardly translates into good economics.
Yeah.
Siasa mbaya.
Maisha mbaya.
So I think from where we are, I worked for Raila Odinga in the last presidential, worked with you.
Yeah.
And we believed that Baba held a vision that had capacity to take this country forward.
Absolutely. The Azimio manifesto, when you're talking about manufacturing, I'm going back to that point in the manifesto.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that after hot air, wild goose chase experience at the Supreme Court and the troubles they are going through now, it should be a warning to everyone who is given a chance to hold a position of responsibility to exercise such positions with so much judiciousness. So to that extent, I would say that my wish is that Raila could come back to lead this country from the front. But then, if that does not happen, I also, because I work with young people and I know the disdain with which they hold this government.
Yeah.
This government is held in contempt.
Yeah.
What happened in 2022 might replicate itself. Part of why certain areas that were our strongholds didn't turn out to vote was the disillusionment of working with someone we had spent 5 years demonizing.
Yeah, then now you're working with him.
And now we're working with him. If Baba joins hands with William Ruto, then I think that it will also give us an opportunity to forge a new epoch. Young people working together, enlightened about their enlightened with the knowledge of their enlightened self-interest, can then now come together and form a pragmatic alliance. And when I talk of pragmatic alliance now, I mean that we might now then work with people whom ordinarily have been part of the problem. But as long as we get a good, clean, corrupt-free candidate, then other people join us.
Yes.
Then we make sure that we install a leadership that would appreciate that the time has come to set aside childish things, as the good scripture, as the good book says.
Raila Odinga actually said on his way when he came back that I am delighted to be back home. You see, east, west, north, and south, home is best. I feel very happy and delighted to be back in Kenya after what we went through. I want to thank everybody, the president, the deputy president, the ministers, the leaders, and the Kenyans who generally traveled with us, he said. And Kidi Mwaga, who is our guest today, also said, I think that this could be Raila's moment, like Charles de Gaulle, who was recalled from retirement to stabilize a country in crisis. Raila, as a transitional president in 2027, might just be the magic wand.
I use that as my entry point.
Yes.
Time and time and time again, people keep underestimating President William Ruto. And that's why they keep getting surprised. You've said he's a master tactician.
Foremost brilliant
Politics.
political manager.
Now, you've talked about a party, a new KANU, that is a home for everybody, that everyone should troop back to.
Kind of fresh.
Now, let me put this perspective to you. The United Democratic Alliance, UDA. People still have the sense that, yes, it was a Kalenjin party with Kikuyus, and Kikuyus are disillusioned, they're even moving away. So it seems like...
it is largely a Kalenjin party now.
However, if you actually take a step back and give it an objective look, the first deputy party leader is from what would otherwise be considered the marginalized Gema community, the smaller or lesser Kikuyus. Forgive put it in quotes. It's part of our political lexicon.
Yes.
But there's that sense of inclusion.
Yes.
You're also seeing that the second deputy party leader, I believe, Governor Issa Timami, that's the coastal region. And still, of course, in the coastal region, you also have the Secretary General of UDA,
Hassan Omar,
Sarai. And so you see some vibrance in the coast.
It's also the Kwale governor.
Very good.
Yeah.
Mvuria.
No, Mvuria is the CS. There's a lady governor. I'm forgetting her name. Yes. Who's of the UDA party.
Yes. Sorry.
Achani was elected as independent.
Oh, independent.
Yes.
Oh, right.
So you then have still with Issa Timami there, being from ANC, which has now merged with UDA. Now the Luya bloc coming into this, and with Prime CS, and you can see the tact in giving him that slot. And the other would-be leaders of the Luya nation are somewhat falling to the wayside. You have that very populous community now being given prominence under UDA. You then have this push very deliberately from Northeastern of the Somali nation also being given prominence and a front seat. Now, in addition to that, you have this master tactician, as you earlier said, winning favor with the Luo nation.
If it was not in politics, William Ruto is the man I would hang out with.
If it was not for politics.
Yes. And the politics is the extent that I think that is not being a good manager. Yes.
Yeah.
So you're seeing this you're actually seeing, and remember, more than half of the registered voters who voted, give or take, even if you dispute some votes, did vote for him, right? However unpopular he seems. But you see, the thing about this sentiment against him, it's perceived, it's not measured. Nobody takes a vote for his unpopularity. So he had those votes, right? And however tough it's been in the past 2 years, if he then starts turning things around, you talked about the budgetary policy. In the last cabinet dispatch that was discussing that budgetary policy, you see, for instance, a line talking about 95% of pending bills being catered to, which will be a fiscal injection to the economy. And of course, you've seen the shilling come strong against the dollar, the good friend CS Mbadi. So you're seeing this maneuvering. A lot of people are focusing on the unpopularity. Meanwhile, this man is establishing anchorage in very many, both political, economy, and I could go on and on quite a bit. I'm still on that issue of a passing cloud. If he achieved as much as he did before he came to the presidency, why do we take for granted to imagine what he would do in that seat, that we would then take it as a matter of fact that he will just be ousted? Now, given that Baba is also seated with him, collaborating, and I want to throw another spanner in the works, that maybe part of the reason Uhuru is being blamed, in the same way you had the influence of Charles Njonjo behind the scenes, maybe Uhuru Kenyatta also saw that if Baba goes, this would be too much power. And so we needed a political constituency, even if through collaboration, to temper it, right? I'm just asking a question. And because you've also considered that it's actually maybe even better that it's actually here. You just said that.
I didn't say that.
I even want to anyway, the question is to Kidi. I will give my remarks after.
I said that it is sad that Baba did not end up as the AUC chair.
Yes.
Because I agree with the notion, with the thinking that Baba was best tooled, best suited to lead the African continent at this point in time.
I agree.
About the question of passing cloud, I think that it is the worst case of political misinformation. Because it is one of those things I would call a classical case of an anti-national unity narrative. I call it anti-national unity narrative because the protests, as they took place last year, was largely driven by young people who felt that their future was being stolen. And to add to that, it also speaks to how the government was communicating its own agenda. There was hubris, there was braggadocio that was misplaced, and all that. And then young people decided that they were not going to let that piece of bill to stay. And I think the president also reacted to it with grace, particularly when he rejected the bill and disbanded the cabinet. But of course, there have been talks that movement of disillusioned young people was captured. If it was captured, we must lay the blame where we must. It goes back to the people we gave responsibility to ensure that our children can sleep soundly at night, and that if I am sick, I can get treatment in the hospital. They're the people we gave the responsibility and gave guns and the money to make sure that if I am protesting today, that I can march from these bill offices and walk all the way to, say, Arambe House, and then come back and sleep soundly. So that if someone attacks me on the way, the blame must go to government. There was the change in the constitution movement of 1974, led by people like Gikonyo Kiano.
Njoroge Mungai.
Njoroge Mungai. Actually, Njoroge Mungai was supposed to be the VP if Moi was removed.
Yes.
But then the move was thwarted when the KANU National Delegates Conference of 1975 aborted. And some of the delegates who had come to Nairobi had to flee the city. The thing is, someone today trying to connect the Gen Z movement and the passing cloud sentiments, I think is someone who is being, number one, disingenuous, and two, attempting to exploit historical ethnic grievances to achieve a nefarious political agenda. Why do I say this? Out of the 60 years we've been independent as a country, 35 of those years, we've had a Kikuyu president. And I will tell you, Sichangi Wakili, that nobody can rule guiltlessly.
Nobody can rule?
Rule guiltlessly.
Yeah.
And the 3 Kikuyu presidents we've had are certainly not guiltless. Sometimes part of the mistakes they might have committed was ethnic, and I say maybe, was ethnic exceptionalism. So then it would be the most preposterous idea for us to get somebody else who is an Kikuyu to engage in precisely what we are accusing those people of
doing.
Humanity must be about replacing one long night of darkness with a brighter day. So that if you replace one long night of darkness with another long night of darkness, then you have lost your humanity. You're actually an animal. So I think that I have had those calls, and I wish that President William Ruto would personally step in. Because some of the people he has entrusted with the responsibility to communicate for government both formally and through the informal channels, are turbocharging this ethnic contempt.
Yeah.
Because when the three presidents might have engaged in ethnic exceptionalism, there is a serious drive right now to engage in ethnic contempt. And that ethnic contempt will come with a consequence.
A big one.
For instance, when Baba lost the AUC, there was a serious mobilization to paint it that the Kikuyus had celebrated the Baba's loss. You know, one thing that Internet of Things has done is that it has liberalized access information. So that today, an average man without education, without exposure, without anything, can say anything in the streets and broadcast it. And we risk falling into the tragedy that James Madison warned about in his Federalist paper number 10, when he talked about mobs taking over democracy. It was shameful to watch parliamentarians who should know better amplifying the simple opinion of ordinary women in the streets to suggest that now that should be part of, that should inform our political mobilization going forward. And I want to make a direct plea to the president if he gets around to watch Politically Connected.
I'm sure one day he shall. Or maybe he is.
That we have elected you as the commander. Where is the camera? Because I need to look at the president in the eye.
Yes. Mr. President.
Mr. President, we elected you as the commander-in-chief. One of the things you must help us do is to achieve national unity. But then you are commander-in-chief at such a difficult time. Sometimes presidents can get blindsided by the very people they've entrusted to work for them. A case in point, look at the history of Lyndon Baines Johnson and how he got blindsided in the Vietnam War. I think for all the political differences, you are a good man. Don't let this country descend into ethnic contempt and potential ethnic anarchy. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
There you have it. We can't say another word after that big finish from the Kidi Mwaga. A message directly to the President, William Ruto, to aspire greater for the country, to be the symbol of national unity, and don't allow us to decay into violence. And not just any kind of violence, but turbocharged by tribalism.
Yes.
You heard it first here at Politikali Konekted. Bishop.
I want to petition the seat of the Speaker that, Madam Speaker, you invite to the floor of the House on another occasion Honorable Member Mr. Kidi Mwaga.
Yes.
And you also invite to the floor of the House Honorable Member Professor Fred Ogola.
Okay.
I love Ogola. I'd love to have a political,
discuss with him.
Yes, slugfest.
Yes.
Intellectual slugfest with him.
I have taken those considerations. And Dr. Fred Ogola, if you're watching this, expect our phone call. So if you haven't subscribed to our audiences, I mean, how else will you be politically connected? So press subscribe, follow us on TikTok, on X, on Facebook. We're the home where you get to unpack all the things that are happening in our political landscape and which is important for you to be connected. So till the next time, stay connected.
See you soon on a screen near you.
Sawa.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Wow.
Commander.